Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 is like a breath of fresh air. From the very first mission, this game instantly felt like a throwback to the glory days of the Xbox 360. I was immediately hit with major Gears of War vibes, sprinkled in with a little bit of Doom and a slight amount of space racism. But you read the title of the video, so I'm not going to waste any time here. Can Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 avoid some of the same tragedies that have plagued many other games from today, such as Helldivers 2? So first off, I think it's important to point out the fact that Space Marine 2 actually has a lot of very good things going for it. For starters, the campaign is actually a really good campaign. I was worried at first that it wasn't going to be long enough, especially considering the game was priced $70, but I was actually very pleasantly surprised with it. The missions were long and well designed, and the world/lore of Warhammer just seems like it was designed to be in a video game. But let's go back to that last comment that I just made a second ago. Yes, this game is $70, which may turn off a lot of people at first, like how I mentioned that I was worried when I saw that it was $70, but the game is definitely a full package. I never played the first Space Marine, so when I first saw that this sequel was announced, I thought it was going to be something more along the lines of a Helldivers 2. That actually ended up being pretty wrong. The focal point of this game is the campaign, which ended up being around 10 hours to complete. And an added bonus, that campaign is co-op, so I've already started more playthroughs with my buddies. But also the multiplayer is pretty decent as well. It isn't just throwaway, and there's a surprising amount of progression that you can go through as well. And there's also operations mode, which are PvE missions. And yes, there are only 6 right now at launch, but they're going to be adding more of those per their roadmap, which we'll go over more on that in a minute. But basically, yeah, I get it. People don't love spending $70 on a game that they're unsure about, but props to the developers here because they actually deliver a full and fun experience that again reminds me of something from the Xbox 360 days. And I do actually prefer when a game is full price and it's just that one-time entry fee. So then that way going forward, you get all the future content for free, which yes, technically this game does have a season pass, but that's just all pretty much cosmetic stuff in there, which is not really like, you know, the content that I'm talking about. So we're good on that one. And in my opinion, this is the best way to charge people for a game. Just have them pay full price from the beginning, and then from that point release all your future content for free. Grand Theft Auto 5 I think has easily been one of the best examples of this model actually working very well. But again, it's still all about how the developers execute it long term. So now let's take a deeper look at that post-launch roadmap that I mentioned earlier. This is another one of the strengths that I think this game has going forward. Looking at the graphic here that the devs provided, the top row in blue, this is all the free content that will be coming to everyone that owns the game. And then the bottom row are the cosmetics that come to anyone who buys the season pass. And when I look at this roadmap, I can just tell this is something that they really nailed here. And it's also something that pisses me off a lot about most games these days. What I mean is they have a lot of good content already worked into the pipeline. And this is something that kills a lot of games these days when they worry too much about trying to get the game released as quickly as possible, only for it to die a month or two after launch because now there's no content keeping the game alive. And you can clearly tell though, looking at this graphic, that they've already been working on future content, and they have a lot of new content slated to release in season 3, which I believe will be spring of 2025. Obviously, this is good news because they don't have to scramble to try and crank out content to keep the game fresh and alive. They have a game plan to release new missions, modes, and enemies, so that way it feels like a constant return on investment for players. Again, this is just something that so many companies just absolutely miss on today. They'll push out their product most of the time unfinished and then expect their live service game to do well when it's getting no real content post-launch. But like I mentioned, this game already released as a good package, and they have a good plan for the content that will be released the first few seasons after launch. And that's just smart business, people. You have to bring as much value to the table as possible, especially if your customers are paying $70 for your game. Now, will this plan be executed well? We'll have to wait and see on that one, obviously, but if the base game is any indication of what's to come, I think we'll be fine. So let's just go ahead and run through the content on each season of this roadmap really quickly. The first season is pretty much just launched. They're adding a practice sparring arena, but nothing too fancy here, so we'll go to the second season, where we got new PvE missions, a harder difficulty, a new enemy, and a new pistol. The second season will be coming winter of 2024, which is great. Don't have to wait a long time at all for that. Of course, it is good to see new missions and a harder difficulty being added, but what really stands out to me is the new enemy. Now, if you aren't familiar at all with Warhammer lore, it's okay, I'm not really either. But to keep it simple, there are a lot of different enemy factions in Warhammer. So that was something that I was kind of wondering about before this game came out, was how many different enemy types would there be in this game? Now, I do know that the first Space Marine featured the Orcs and also had the Chaos Marines pop up towards the end. But besides those two, that was pretty much it. So I was really hoping that they would dive into some more of the different enemy factions in this game, which it's great to see that that is actually happening. I'm in the firm belief that you need new enemies constantly being added in order to keep the game fresh and alive. Otherwise, you can add all the different kind of missions that you want, but at the end of the day, the game's going to end up feeling stale if you keep going up against these same enemies every single time. And this actually brings me to one of the biggest complaints that I currently have about Helldivers 2, which I made a video about Helldivers just a few weeks ago, so if you want to check that out, that'll be up in the corner and also down in the description below. But something that really bothers me about Helldivers 2 currently is the fact that they haven't added any new enemy factions since the game came out over 6 months ago. So it's made the game feel really repetitive. So I'm really happy to see that in Space Marine 2 we'll be getting a new enemy not only in Season 2 but also in Season 3 and in Season 4. This will definitely go a long way in keeping the game fresh, new, and interesting, and it will be great for the game long term. Season 3 is clearly going to be the biggest season in terms of overall content, and this is going to release around spring of 2025. This season will add new PvE missions, PvE prestige ranks, a new PvP game mode and maps, Battle Barge expansion, which is basically just going to be some sort of expansion to the home base, but no real details on that yet, and a new enemy, which we just talked about a second ago. So this is obviously a lot of content, so I'll be curious to see how they release it come Season 3, if they'll just drop it all at once or if they'll drop it in a steady stream throughout the season. Either way, it's a lot of really good stuff, and again, it's just adding more value to the game for the players. And then finally, we have Season 4. This season adds a new game mode called Horde Mode, also another new enemy type, and a new weapon. So that is all the content that they've currently revealed so far for the first few seasons post-launch for Space Marine 2. And as you can probably guess, I think this is a pretty good plan, and I think they did solid with this roadmap. And honestly, it's props to the devs for revealing this roadmap already, because you want to keep people engaged and you want to get them excited about the future content that is coming to your game. But will all of this good stuff that I just mentioned keep this game from dying quickly? So here are some of the big things that they need to avoid doing in order to avoid shooting themselves in the foot. Number one, do not do any major nerfs or rebalancing. Now, this first one may be a direct shot at Helldivers, but if that game serves as any example of what not to do, please do not nerf the hell out of your game. Space Marine 2, just a few weeks after launch here, feels very solid right now. The only minor complaint that I have is some melee weapons feel a little too underpowered in PvP, but that's honestly it. So as long as you keep everything else pretty much the same as it is right now, you should be okay. Just do not make the game too difficult and suck the life out of it by making every weapon terrible, making the game not fun to play anymore. Number two, keep the updates coming in consistently, especially after this roadmap is over. I already mentioned that I thought the roadmap that we broke down earlier was a very good plan. So let's just make sure that all of the content that is in that roadmap is released on time and hopefully as bug-free as possible. And then more importantly, beyond that, keep the updates coming in with the same amount of quality and content that this roadmap has. More enemies, more missions, and more game modes is what is going to keep this game alive long term. So put a bigger focus on that going forward. And number three, consider adding more campaign missions, maybe even a raid mode, and also just make sure you execute all of your future updates well. This last one just kind of throws a few things together, but I think all of these things are really important. The campaign is really fun and it's great to play co-op with friends, so if they added more missions in the future, I just think that would be a net positive thing going forward. And raids, I think, is a concept that would work really well with this game. I know that we already have PvE operations, but I mean full-blown raids, similar to what we saw in something like Destiny 1 and 2, I think would be awesome. It's great that they're adding a horde mode down the line, but I imagine this will be something similar to what Gears of War did with their horde mode. The Destiny raids took an extreme amount of teamwork and they were very challenging, and it felt like a huge accomplishment once you were finally able to beat them. I just think that the mechanics of this game would work really well with a raid type game mode. But I just think this is a concept that would work really well, and it's just another thing that would help keep it alive in the future. And of course, with any future updates, make sure that you keep the same amount of quality that is currently in the game right now post launch, because it's in a very solid state. And yes, this one's kind of a no-brainer, but you know, you can never overstate it. But I don't think this would be a problem because, like I mentioned, this game launched in a pretty polished state, which, side note, it's sad how many games these days launch and are just absolutely garbage, but that's a topic for a whole nother video. But yeah, that pretty much sums it up, and I've been really pleasantly surprised with Space Marine 2, so I'll be looking forward to what they bring to the game going ahead. So let me know what you think about Space Marine 2 down in the comments below. Do you think it will be able to manage staying alive long term, or do you think it will pull a Helldivers 2? If you enjoyed this video and want to see some more content like it going forward, then make sure to like this video and subscribe. If you made it all the way to the end of this one, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thanks again for watching, and I hope everyone has a good one.